Hi everybody, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to post this PowerPoint up here and kind of do a voiceover just to kind of talk about one important part of citizenship, and that is the electoral process. We've been kind of throwing around this idea of citizenship and what it looks like, and but let's kind of plow through this. We know that different states hold primary elections first. Remember, a primary election is where each party, the Democrats and the Republicans, start narrowing down their field of candidates. Trump is the presumptive candidate for 2020 since he is currently president, so he will be the Republican running again. The Democrats, remember, we're going through the process of trying to narrow it down, and it really looks like Joe Biden is going to be that candidate. But we talked about this, New Hampshire having its first primary, being the first primary in the country. Another state that was important was Iowa. They were the first state to have their caucuses. A caucus, if you remember, is a place where everybody gets together. They pick a corner, they have discussions, they decide who the best candidate for their county or their area is going to be, and they come up with the decision. But again, the whole point of a caucus and a primary is to narrow down who the candidate for each of the parties is going to be. Super Tuesday, we had back in March this year. It is usually a Tuesday where the presidential election, and in the presidential election year, which this is, where the greatest number of states hold primary elections to select candidates to the National Party Convention. In 2008, there were 24 states that participated in Super Tuesday. This past year, I want to say it was between 12 and 16. Missouri's primary was actually the Tuesday after Super Tuesday. But again, you get a lot of people out participating, a lot of people out voting, and again, the goal is to try to narrow it down to who you want your candidate to be. So, let's talk about swing voters and swing states. So what is a swing voter? A swing voter is a person who is really undecided on how they will vote. They don't tend to vote Democrat all the time. They don't tend to vote Republican all the time. Sometimes they vote Democrat. Sometimes they vote Republican. Sometimes it's about this issue. Sometimes it's about that issue. Sometimes, like my mom says, you just get a good vibe from a candidate. So some voters, strictly vote Democrat maybe, or strictly vote Republican. That is not the case with a swing voter. So let's talk about what a swing state is. It is a state in which no single candidate has overwhelming support. Really, no single party has overwhelming support. If you look at the map over here, the ones that are sort of faded, the light reds, are states that typically go Republican. The light blues are states that typically go Democrat. You can see there, Missouri sort of smack dab in the middle is a light red because we tend to go Republican. But the darker states, these are some of our swing states, and it kind of varies, but this is back to the previous election. But you can see Nevada, Colorado, Iowa, Wisconsin. You can see Ohio, Vermont, North Carolina, Florida, and even New Hampshire up here are considered swing states. Because it's never a sure thing which way that state's going to go as far as Democrat or Republican goes. And as a result of that, candidates tend to spend a lot of extra time in those places doing their campaigning. Why televise presidential debates? It helps people get to know their candidates. You can see in the very top is a picture, a little bit of an old picture of President Obama. And one of his debates with presidential candidate Mitt Romney. Also, you see at the bottom there a black and white picture. This is actually the first televised debate ever in U.S. history, and this was the 1960 presidential election. That is actually Richard Nixon over there on the left and John F. Kennedy over there on the right. This televised debate made history. Not just because it was the first one ever, but for a few other reasons as well. Both these men go on to be president, but Nixon had just been getting over a cold and looked kind of pale and sickly. Kennedy, on the other hand, chose to wear stage makeup and looked great under the heated lights that was recording this debate. It's kind of interesting. People who watched the debate on television said that Nixon was sweating and he kept wiping his brow with his handkerchief and he seemed extremely nervous. People who watched on TV said Kennedy easily, hands down, won the debate. People who listened on radio and did not have these sort of external stimuli to judge people by said that Nixon clearly won the debate based off of the information presented. But a debate can really help you, or it can really make you look bad. It depends how prepared you are. It depends how your interactions with the other candidate is. But it's a pretty big deal. I wanted to show you a couple of campaign ads that are kind of interesting. That, of course, campaign ads have huge impacts on how we view candidates and how we decide who we are going to vote for. I'm just going to show you a couple. Let me see if I can open these while I'm recording. Doesn't look like I can. Anyway, I might put these, let me try one more time. No, I can't open them. Anyway, if you want to look at them, there's some pretty interesting ads. The Daisy Girl ad is from 1964 and talks about nuclear energy. Morning in America is from the 80s. That was, wow, President Ronald Reagan running. Willie Horton one, ouch, was a terrible ad that really hurt the man that was, the man that was running that year, one of them. The 3 a.m. ad is kind of interesting. This was one of the first ads Hillary Clinton ran in the 2008 campaign when she was running against Obama. And my personal favorite is the laughter ad from 1968. To kind of go full circle and talk about what we talked about at the beginning last week, this idea of interest groups. Groups whose members share the same viewpoint and work to shape public policy on certain issues. People who have a concern, people who have an idea about a certain issue simply work together because they have a common interest, okay? You also have political action committees. Political action committees, as it says here by the bullet point, they're political extensions of an interest group. And you have can see some of them here. The United Steelworkers PAC, the Grocers, the National Grocer Association PAC, Illinois Nurses PAC, Wisconsin Gun Owners Political Action Committee, the Ice Cream, Milk, and Cheese PAC. These are political action committees that are an extension of an interest group. They have an interest, but they use money to influence politics. So what does it mean to lobby? Well, trying to influence members of a lawmaking group, often involving money, not always. But a person who does this is called a lobbyist. A person who goes to a political candidate and either, number one, just tries to influence them and inform them on an issue. It could be maybe you offer to give money to their campaign if they promise to support your issue. It kind of depends. But sometimes money's involved and sometimes it's not. But more often than not, let's be honest, it is. What is the Electoral College? We've already really kind of talked about this, so this is sort of a repeat of some information, but it's a group of people in each state and D.C. who formally select the president. How many electors does each state get? Well, its number of representatives plus its number of senators gives it the number of electoral votes. So if you look at Missouri there with 10, that means we have 8 representatives because each state gets 2 senators. For a grand total of 10 electoral votes. We've talked about this before. You can see California with its whopping 55, Texas with 38. What does the popular vote matter? A lot of people are like, why do I have to go vote? Nobody pays attention. It doesn't really matter. Electoral votes elect the president anyway. Well, if you win all of it, let's say you win a popular vote in a state and you're a candidate, you get all of that state's electoral votes. So in Missouri, in 2016, Trump won all 10 of Missouri's electoral votes. Even though Clinton did get some votes in our states, doesn't matter. Most states in the United States are what they call winner take all, with the exception of Nebraska and I believe it's either Vermont or New Hampshire. Sorry. So when is election day? This, as you can see, is a calendar from way, way, way into the future. Election day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Okay, so let's find this. The first Tuesday after the first Monday. So, this is a calendar from 2036. So the first Monday would be November 3rd. The first Tuesday after the first Monday would be November 4th. So election day would be November 4th. What does inauguration mean? When a president takes an oath of office and becomes president, that is the presidential inauguration. Oftentimes they are done in public on the steps of the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. You can see a picture up top of President Obama being sworn in. His wife was holding the Bible. On the right-hand side, that is President Reagan from the 80s being sworn in. The black and white picture, kind of interestingly enough, I don't know if you know who that is, but well, the woman on the right is Jacqueline Kennedy. Jacqueline Kennedy was there in Dallas the day that President Kennedy was shot. The man taking the oath of office there is the vice president. He's aboard Air Force One, and he is being sworn in as president. That's President Johnson. So not all inaugurations are all pomp and circumstance and fancy gatherings. At least in the situation, of Johnson, he had to take office under not exactly a exciting moment in history. Anyway, I hope some of this helped explain a few random things about citizenship and a few random things about the electoral process. Tomorrow I'm gonna give you some more information, so I hope that helps too. Anyway, I hope you are all well. Take care, guys.